Right, I'm going to show you a few basic tools first of all. You need a vise. I mean, it doesn't have to be an expensive one. This is an AAA vise, which will do. You need a bobbin threader, bobbin holder, pair of rattle pliers, and a couple of pair of scissors. Now, heavy duty scissors are for cutting wire and heavy materials, and a fine pair for cutting threads. I mean, these are a fairly good pair, but any decent scissors will do. And last of all, a whipping tool. We'll show you how to use that a little bit later on. Now, first thing you do is put the hook into the vise. Keep it fairly straight and just lock that in. Now that's all fairly secure. Now I'm going to thread this onto this bobbin holder using this threader. Just makes it a little bit easier when your eyes are tired like mine. Alright, that's the thread on the bobbin holder. We're using a fairly bright thick thread just to show you how it works. Now what we're going to do is we're going to catch this thread in onto the hook, and all you do is pop that over the hook and then wrap and catch in that loose end. And then if you're winding touching turns down the hook shank until you're about ready to put in your materials. Now I'm at that point now, so what I'm going to do is just snip off that waste thread. Now if you're putting tailing material in, this is the point where you want to be putting it in. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put 3 or 4 fibres of pheasant tail into this one, and I want about 1/3 of that shank length. So I just offer them up, check for length, and then I'm going to take a turn over the top of that, and again wind it down, touching turns. Now if you're going to add a rib, this is the time you want to be adding a rib. Now we're going to put some copper wire in. I'm going to use a fairly thick one so you can see it. Use the big scissors for snipping that off. Now again, catch that in. I'm going to catch this in underneath the body, and then you take that down again in touching turns till you get to a point just before the bend of the hook. Now we can start adding materials in. First of all, I'm going to snip off this waste and trim that wire to about the same length. Now we can start adding body materials. Now you can use any sort of dubbing. I'm just going to use a light coloured dubbing so you'd be able to see this one. This is just a white fine dubbing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to wax the thread. Now this is a soft wax, and all you do is run that through the thread. Just makes it a little bit tacky, helps to adhere the dubbing material. Now if you take off, you don't want huge amounts of this, take off a little bit of dubbing material. I'm just going to tease that out, and then I can offer it to the thread. And pop that onto the thread. Now you can roll it around the thread, and what I always tend to do is I spin the bobbin, and this just helps tangle it in. This bobbin is a little bit different to the one I normally use because it's a little bit bigger. I'm just going to spin that, and what's happening now is that will actually trap some of that into the threads, and it makes it a little bit more secure. Now I can start winding in that body material, and what I'm trying to do is create a fairly slim profile body fairly even. Take it to a point about midway on that shank. Let me just spin that off a bit. You can just remove any excess material. And now, if I want to put a thorax cover in, again I'm going to use a little bit of pheasant tail. What we can do is we can strip out about 6 or 7 fibres. Lay these just to one side of your shank, and what I'm going to do is when I wind this over now, it'll actually pull it on top of the shank of that hook, and that's in the right position now, so I can add a body and thorax. Now I'm just going to snip off that waste material. Now I'm going to add a thorax. Again, I'm going to use a different coloured dubbing material, just a little bit darker. And again, I'm just going to tease out a little bit and wax that thread again. Now, one thing I forgot to do, because I forgot to wire ribbon, I'm going to do that now. And what we're doing is, we're wire rib, all I'm doing is trying to create a segmented body, so even turns through that body, right up through to that thorax area. And again, when I get to that thorax area, I can tie that off. Now I'm going to put a couple of turns over that copper wire to hold it tight, and instead of cutting it with scissors, I'm just going to waggle that, and that should break just underneath that thread. There we go. Now I'm ready to add some dubbing material in for my body. And again, wax your thread, just creates a little bit of adhesion for that dubbing. And then again, wind that on and spin your bobbin. Just take that down a little bit. And again, that just creates a little bit of adhesion to that. Now again, what I'm going to do is just wind a neat thorax area underneath that. If you put too much dubbing on, you can always take it off. Just strip it off with your fingers. Take that out of the way. Now, once I get to that point, I can just clear that head area a little bit. So I want to show you what else we do. Now you can pull over your thorax cover. Pull that over and trap that with a thread. Now once that's in position, a few turns around that just to trap it in and trim off that excess. And now all we need to do is whip finish. Now this whip finishing tool is a lot easier than doing it by hand. What you do with this one is catch it into that hook and then slip it into that other hook. Bring it up and turn it over. And what you're going to do now is trap that line inside that. Put a few turns in. Now what I've actually done there, I've caught a little bit of thread dubbing in. I'll just take that out. Just form a nice neat head and tighten that off. Trim off that excess thread, and that one's done. At this point, what you do is a little bit of varnish on the end of that dubbing needle, and you can pop a little drop just around that head area. That just seals it, makes it look a bit neater, and that's your finished fly. Now we're going to try and tie you one or two flies that we use on the river to catch a few fish. So I'm going to start with one of our favourites, which is a little pheasant tail nymph, and we're going to tie this one on a size 14. Let's grab one of these hooks, and again attach that into the vise. Keep it fairly straight. And before you start, if you get your materials to hand, now this is going to be mainly used with a pheasant tail, centre tail out of pheasant, cock pheasant. The thread I'm going to be using is a brown, fairly fine, it's about an 8/0, and again I'm just going to thread that through this bobbin holder. That one's threaded, and now we're ready to start. Now I'm going to catch this in again over the top of the shank and then wind down the shank, trapping in that other thread. Keep that in touching turns till you get to around about a midway point. Now we can put in our tail, and again with this one on a size 14 I'm going to use about 3 fibres, and again I want them about 1/3 the length of the shank, so I'm just going to offer that up just to check, and then wind over the top, trap them in and carry on down the shank. Now with this one we're going to add a fine copper rib. I'm going to use a fine copper wire, and again I'm going to trap that underneath the shank. Bring it in from that side. Now this is one of the things you'll have to practice a little bit. Once you've got that in, take that thread just before the bend of the hook and leave that. Now we can trim off that waste. And just trim that wire down. Now for the body, I'm going to take 4 or 5 fibres of pheasant tail again. And again I'm just going to catch these in on top of that hook. And this time I'm going to take the thread back up the shank. I'm going to take it to a point of about midway again on that shank. Trim off any loose fibres that you don't need. Now I'm ready to wind in the body. Now all we're doing with this one is we're winding this one in touching turns. Try and keep it fairly neat. I'm going to take that right up to the centre of that shank, and then I'm going to tie it off. Just a turn of thread over the top to trap it, a couple of more turns to lock it, and now cut out that excess. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take out that wire rib, and I'm going to wind this in the opposite direction to which I've just taken that body fibre, which means I'm going to take it over the top that way. And again, wind up neat, even body turns until you get to that point again. And when I get to this point now, I need a little bit of weight on this one, so I'm going to wrap this excess wire underneath that thorax area and just build it up a bit. Just adds a little bit of weight to the fly. I mean, sometimes we'll add a little bit of lead, sometimes a little bit of copper wire. I don't want too much because it makes it a little bit bulky and unsightly. It just adds a little bit more weight to the fly, helps it get down into the water a little bit deeper. And just trim that excess. Now I'm going to use pheasant tail again for the thorax cover. And for this I'm going to strip out about 7 or 8 fibres. And again, lay these on top of the hook and trap in. Just even these out. Now once I'm at that point, trim off these waste fibres. Now I'm just going to bind down these loose ends. Make sure that that's not going to split. And now I'm going to add a thorax cover. Now for this I'm going to use some hare's ear. Now that's an hare's ear mask. I'm going to strip a few fibres from the ear itself. So you've got some nice guard hairs on this one. And again, I'm going to wax my thread. This helps to hold that dubbing on. Take a pinch of this hare's ear. Some nice guard fibres on that one. Just position that onto the thread and roll it in your fingers. Now I'm going to spin the bobbin again. And that just helps catch in a few of those fibres and helps hold them in position. And now I can form the thorax. All I'm doing is winding towards the head and eye until I get a neat body. Now I'm ready to pull over that thorax cover. And again, pull it over and trap at the eye. A few more turns just to keep that in position. Now if you've gone too far, just push it back with your nail a little bit. And then I can trim off any excess fibres. And now I'm ready to whip finish. And again, catch in both hooks over the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And if you do want to build up a neat little head, now's the time you can do it. You can add as many turns to that head as you want. And that forms a nice neat head. Make sure that that's not going to come undone. And again, just trim off that loose thread. And that's one pheasant tail ready to fish. Now sometimes with these guard hairs, if you want a little bit more movement, you can pick them out with a dubbing needle. It just creates a bit more of a leggy aspect. And that's a finished fly. And we're going to tie a gold-head hare's ear, and I'm going to select, again it's going to be a size 14 hook and a 3mm gold head bead, which I'm going to fit now. Pop that onto the hook. Just make sure that's not going to come over the eye. And again, place that hook into the vise and lock it in. Now, catching your thread, again, in the same way, just behind the bead. This is fairly basic, but this fly does catch a lot of fish. Take that down the body, again in touching turns. I'm going to take this a little bit further than normal. And now I'm going to add some tails. Now I'm going to use the hare's mask again. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few guard hairs out of this one. I don't want too many. So we'll just pinch out a few. Take off any excess that I don't need. Any underfur. And again, I've just got a few fibres just to suggest a tail. Now I'm going to offer that up onto the hook, and again binding on top. Just check for length, seems about right, and just lock them in. Now I'm going to rib this one with a bit of this gold tinsel, and again I'm going to catch this in underneath the shank. And now I'm ready to actually put some dubbing in. Now for this one we're going to use the hare's ear again. And I'm going to lightly wax that thread again.
And what's this wax do, Tommy?
It makes the thread a little bit tacky, and it helps hold these fibres in place. I mean, because these fibres are what are actually going to make this fly work. So what I'm going to do is just offer a few of these fibres up. And if you had too much, as I say, you can always take a little bit off at the end. If you don't add enough, you can put a little bit more on. It's when you get used to tying a few of these flies, you can gauge how much you're going to use. Now I'm going to spin that bobbin holder again, and all that does, it opens out the fibres and locks a few of them into place. Now again, start at that tail and wind up through to the body. Now, as you can see, I'm going to run out a dubbing on this one, so all I'm going to do, a little bit more wax, and add a little bit more of this dubbing. Again, exactly the same. Pop on the amount that you think you need. Take off that excess. Spin that bobbin again. That just helps trap them in again. And now I can carry on right up to the back of that gold bead. Now I can pop the rib on. What I'm going to do is I'm going to catch one turn right at the tail, and then I'm going to wind this in even spacings right up to that gold bead. Catch in that thread. A few more turns, lock that in. Cut off any excess. And again, whip finish. Now with this gold bead, I'm just going to make sure that that can't slip too far back, so I'm going to have to build up a little bit of thread behind that just to lock it in. So I'm going to put a few turns in just to lock that, and now all I'm going to do is carry on a few more turns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just check that that bead's not moving. And again, once you've done this, if you want to add a little drop of varnish just behind that gold bead, just to bind everything together, that makes sure that that can't slip. Now trim off that waste thread, and that one's done. You've got some nice guard hairs that give it a little bit of movement, makes it look like a few legs, represents some sort of hatching nymph or whatever. A little bit of gold head and gold rib gives it a little bit of flash. It's caught as hell of a lot of fish, this fly. That one's finished. Right, we're going to tie a dry fly now. Again, I'm going to use a size 14. Put that into the vise. And again, it's just the same again, catching your thread. And then take that down towards the bend. Now I'm going to use some different fibres now for the tail. And these are just off a cape that's, well, it's a dyed cape, this one. And all I'm going to do is offer them up for length and catch them in on top.
Just when you've tied that in, Tommy, just show us that cape, please, will you? Just so we can have a look at it.
Now this is a dun cape, and we were done when we bought it. We paid too much for it. It's semi-genetic. It's not as good as some of the other ones we got. I'll show you one in a second, which I'm going to use for tying in the hackle. And that's this one. Now this is a genetic.
And that's is it a whiting cape, that, Tommy?
This one, it were, weren't it? Yeah, this was a whiting cape. I mean, you've got long feathers. You can tie half a dozen flies with some of these feathers. I mean, and everything's nice and even. The barbs and everything on the feather are lovely. Nice stem on them, not too tough. We paid quite a bit of money for some of these, but we share them. We cut them in half and share them. I mean, and we've had these a good few years now, and they'll last me out. I know they'll last Steve out.
They'll last the rest of his life, won't they, Tommy?
They will. Right, with this one, I'm going to put a more layer body on. I'm just going to take that a little bit further down. And I've got a mole layer patch here, which I'm going to strip a few fibres out of. And again, all you're doing, just pinch them out. A bit more wax on this thread. And now I can pop this dubbing material on again. Just going to space that out a little bit more even. Just tease it into position. And again, just spin that.
It's just a matter of holding weight to it on your finger, isn't it, Tom? Just spin your bobbin.
Yeah.
Weight to your thread.
This one seems to work a lot better than some of the others. And now I can wind in the body. I'm going to try and keep this fairly neat and tight. Any stray fibres you can always take off later. Now when I get to a point about a third down the shank, I'm just going to tie in what I'm going to use for my hackle feather. Now again, it's off a genetic bird, this one. I'm going to strip off a few of the fibres below that, and now I'm ready to tie that in. Now what we're doing with this one is I'm going to tie this one in just underneath that shank with that good side facing towards me. And I'm just going to take that a little bit further back so I can actually get a nice tying in. Now trim off that excess stalk, otherwise it gets in way high. Just take that out, and I'm going to take that right up to the eye. Right, I missed that.
I missed it, Tommy.
That's what you call age.
It's our eyes, isn't it? We're getting on a bit.
Too old. Right, just make sure I take that little bit of dubbing off, otherwise that's going to get it where. Now when you're taking these feathers, all I'm going to do is take that around the shank, and you can see how it splays out the fibres. Now I'm going to keep moving that down towards the eye. About 4 or 5 turns, and once I'm near that eye, I can actually tie that in, and all I'm doing is trapping that in with the thread just behind the eye, just to catch that in. I'm just going to trim off that excess, and now I'm going to whip finish. Any stray fibres, just trim out. Again, using the whip finish tool. About 10 turns, and that's finished. Snip off that excess. That's a finished fly. Right, these are the 3 flies we've just tied. 2 basic nymphs and a basic dry. Later on we will show you the box of flies that we're going to use on the river. They're all going to be based around these 3 flies. And what we'll do, we might change the sizes, and we might just change the colouring on some of these. Because all you're looking for are trigger points on any fly that you tie. And that could be shape, form or colour. Now that's been our main principle whenever we've tied any flies. There's certain times when a certain colour will actually get a few more bites. There's other times when you may need to tie something a lot heavier than that one with the gold bead to actually get down to the fish, because they're down here on the bottom. But the basic rules are the same. I mean, patterns can vary. I mean, you will have your own favourites. We'll show you another one, a Czech nymph style, which uses a little bit more lead wire underbody. And we'll just put you one of them together just to show you the basic way of tying one of them. So we'll do that one now. Right, we're going to tie a Czech nymph this time. Now this is going to utilise a lead underbody and a shell back. So what we'll do is we'll show you how to tie one of these, because these tend to utilise a little bit more weight than some of the other flies, and they get down a little bit deeper. Now I'm tying this one on a size 10 grub hook, and again start off catching in the thread. I'm going to take that right down through the body. What I'm going to do now, I'm putting this on first so I can actually put some lead wire over the top, and it just helps hold it in position. I'm going to take that down towards the back end of this bend, trim off that loose thread, and now I'm going to wind in a layer of lead wire. Now this is fairly fine lead wire because I don't want to bulk this body up. And I'm just going to offer that up to that hook, and I'm going to wind that in touching turns back up towards the head. And this gives it enough weight to get down into a swim where the fish are actually living most times.
And it's mainly for fast water, isn't it, Tom?
It's mainly for, yeah, it's a fast water nymph. I mean, we tend to fish a lot of these type of rivers where it is fast. Now I'm just going to break that off. Now I'm going to run this thread and crisscross it across that lead wire. That just helps hold it in position, stops it moving. And now I can start adding body materials. Now with this type of fly, the last thing that's going to come over is the shell bag. So that's the first thing I'm going to tie in. Now this is just a strip. It's like a rubbery type material. You can get different forms of this one. You've got a shiny side and a matte side, depending on which way you want this fly to fish. I'm going to use this shiny side. So what you do is tie that in at the end, and if you notice on the end of this one, I've actually just trimmed that to a point. It just helps when I'm tying it in. Now I'm going to tie this right at the back of that lead wire and just trap that in there. It's a little bit tricky. You want to try and keep this one nice and neat. So again, just offer that up, and now I can pull that into position. Now I'm going to wire rib this one with some gold wire. So I'm just going to snip a piece of that off, and again I'm going to offer that underneath and tie that in. Just make sure that's nice and tight. And now for body material. Now, colour wise, you can always mix one or two different dubbing materials together to form a different colour. With this one I'm going to use some orange seal's fur, and I'm going to mix that with a little bit different colour, just to tone it down a little bit. You could actually add 2 or 3 different colours to this if you wanted to. And all I'm going to do is mix that in, and that tones it down a little bit.
And you can use whatever colour you want, can't you, Tom?
Yeah, I
different
mean,
variations.
And you will get different variations of this. Now, again, I'm going to wax this thread to actually put this dubbing onto. A little bit of light wax. Now I can add some of this dubbing material. And again, just take off pinches, offer it up to the thread. Just roll that around the thread. A little bit more tricky with this seals first, a little bit more coarse. It don't matter if it's too spiky, it all adds to the finished fly. Now again, I'm going to spin that bobbin holder, just to try and trap a few of them fibres.
And just take it weight with your finger again, yeah?
Yeah. And that just helps bind that in. And now I can start forming the body. And all I'm doing is winding that, covering that leg body all the way up to the top of that lead. And again, I've run out of a little bit of dubbing material, so I'll just add a little bit more. Again, a little pinch. Pop that on. What I'm going to do with this one, I'm going to change the colour at the head. I'm going to put a little bit of hare's ear in. That should do me for that. I'm just going to tie that in. Any loose fibres that you don't want, you can trim out. Now I'm going to use some hare's ear again, and all I'm going to do is strip a few fibres off this hare's ear. Again, just wax the thread. Pull that on. Again, I'm going to spin that on again. Just take that, just dogs off that thorax area. Give it a little bit of movement. And now I'm ready to put the rib on. Now sometimes I'll rib over the top of this shell bite. This one I'm going to actually rib first. So it just hides that little bit of gold wire. And again, nice even spacing up that hook. Just try and create a segmented body. And once you get in towards that head area, tie off. Again, just waddle that. That just takes off that gold wire. Now I can pull over that shell back and tie that in at the head area. Right, I'm just going to put a couple of turns on that, and I'm just going to make sure that that's nice and stretched. Now once I get to that stage, a few turns, I'll take a few underneath that before I trim it. Trim off any excess, any stray fibres, just push these back a little bit, and now I can form a nice neat head on this one. Again, whip finish. It's not as neat as I wanted, but it'll do. Again, drop a varnish if you want. Trim off that loose thread, and that's your finished fly. Little shell bite check nymph.
Some people colour them up with marker pens, different colours that
Oh
shell
yeah,
back
what I'll do
into.
is, I don't know what I've got on here.
So that's another variation of colour, isn't it, what you can use in.
That's right. I think that's, right, I've got a black one here. I'll just show you what you can do with that. Just put a little bit of colour in on that. Just darkens that area off a little bit. Makes it look a little bit more buggy. And just fade that in a little bit.
And a good all round fly tool.
Yeah, checking them. So yeah, I mean, you could pick some of that body material out for legs if you need to. Or I'll leave it as it is. I'm going to show you another one where I'm going to rib it on the outside because it does hold that shell back in a little bit more secure. So we'll do another one and just show you that one now. Right, a check nymph again. I'm just going to pop that hook in the vise. I'm just going to straighten that up a little bit to give me right position. Now catch that thread in again. Because I'm going to use a lead underbody on this one again, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this thread right through. This just gives it something to bind to. Helps stop it moving on that shank.
It stops lead slipping up and down.
It does. And what I'm going to do is just trim that loose thread off. And just take this a little bit further around that bend. Now I'm going to take the lead wire. I'm going to offer that up onto the shank. Just try and gauge it for length. And now I'm going to wind that in touching turns all the way up to that eye, leaving it well short of the eye. This just creates a little bit of nice weight to this fly. Let's take a few more turns around that back end of that shank. And just tidy up that. And now I'm just going to crisscross this thread over the top of that lead wire, just to hold it in position. Now this one's going to be a little bit different from the first one I did because I'm going to actually put the gold wire over the top of the shell back. So the gold wire actually goes in first this time. Pop that in underneath that shank. Just bring that thread down. Right, here we go. Catch in that wire and bind that down tight. I'm just going to fold that back up towards that shank. Because this is, with being a fairly bulky fly, this one underneath, doesn't really matter about that little bit of loose stuff. In fact, I'm going to trap that in, make sure it can't move. Right, now for the shell bag. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to trim this on the end for tying in. So I'm just going to cut a little point onto this. This is where good sharp scissors come in. That just creates something that I can use to tie in with. Now this one I'm going to tie with the mat side facing outwards. And again, catch in at the back of that hook.
And this again, if you haven't got none of that shell bait, you could use a little bit of
polythene. Yeah, and use it in different colours as well. Again, just bind that down nice and tight. I'm going to use some more of that mixed dubbing, so I'm going to wax this thread. And now I'm going to offer up some dubbing. Just tease that out a little bit. Roll it in your fingers. And then I'm going to spin this bobbin again. Just tease that out. Missed it, that one. Let me just turn that off. That just helps to hold that together. Now I'm ready to form my body. And all I'm doing is working back up to that eye. Just keep twisting that a little bit, try and keep these fibres a little bit tighter. Leaving it well short of that head area. And now I'm going to add in a little bit of hairs here to change colour. Now this one I'm going to leave a little bit more rough finished. It resembles legs, gives it a little bit of movement. Again, little pinch of hairs here. Might need a little bit more on there. Again, just spin that bobbin. I just want a little bit more hairs here. Again, just pull a few more fibres off that. A little bit of wax again. And after that up, just tease that together. There we go. I'm just going to bring that little bit back a bit. And now I can bring over that shell back. Tie that in. Just going to trim that. Now bring over the wire rim. And again, what you're trying to do is create a little bit of a segmented body. So I'm going to pull this fairly tight. It'll just squeeze everything down a little bit. Try and keep it nice and even. Now, just going to tie that off at the head.
You're just trapping that wire in, aren't you, Tom?
Yeah. I'm going to keep a little bit of tension on that thread while I just waddle that. That just breaks it off nice and neat.
Just work hardening wire into it until it breaks.
That's it. And again, whip finish. Just keeps everything together. Trim off. And there you have it. I mean, if you want to, you can just tease out a little bit of that excess fibre. And that's your finished fly.
Again, a good all round fly. A bit stronger than the other one, Tom, with wire rib up back into it.
It is. Just makes it stand out a little bit more.
Yeah.
But these normally fish upside down anyway with that weight that's added to that underbody. So they'll actually fish that way up. I mean, they will run about. I mean, but so you're actually looking at that fly from that point of view. Another dry fly here. This is on a size 16, a little bit smaller. And what I'm going to use is mainly rabbit fur. I'm even going to use some of these guard hairs for the tail. So we'll show you that in a second. Let me just get my bobbin. And We're ready. There we go. Right, again, catching your thread. Take that down towards that bend. I'm just going to trim out these loose fibre, this loose fibre. And now I'm going to pick out a few guard hairs off this rabbit fur patch.
What do you mean with guard hairs, so?
They're just longer hairs that little bit spikier. I mean, I don't want too many, with it being a small look, but it can represent. Sometimes I do put a bunch of these in to represent a shuck. I mean, so if you're looking at olive patterns, then you're looking at, normally they've got two tails, but this, it helps sit the fly right as well sometimes. So what I'm going to do is I just offer these up, have a look, see what that looks like on that back end. That looks about right. And now catching over the top, and just take that down towards that bend, leaving it fairly short.
What do you mean with a shuck, Tommy?
When flies hatch from the nymph stage, it's like, just like maggots do. They turn into a chrysalis form, and then they hatch out of that, and it's actually a fly that emerges. With waterborne insects, with nymphs, the nymph actually comes to the surface, the skin splits, and out comes the upwing fly. Now, these flies tend to leave a shuck skin, and sometimes they do get trapped in the surface film. They get stuck in the shuck. And it's that shuck sometimes that might be the trigger. It might be just catching fly, fish know about it. I mean, because that's all you're looking for with any dry fly is you're looking for trigger points.
What's triggers for, Tom? What's it do, trigger?
Trigger, I mean, if a fish looks up, it sees something that it thinks is edible. And if it's something that it's locked in onto, I mean, we've had hatches, we've had fish taking green fly when there's been lots of green fly about. Well, we put big flies on and actually caught that fish because it's a mouthful. But there's also times when they do get locked onto certain things, and you've got to try and match the hatch. Now, there's a lot of nonsense talked about that, I think, because we've tied flies that represent hatching flies, but it's just trigger points that we're looking for, and that's normally shape, size, form. You get a lot of people that tend to try and tie too realistic. Now, if there's real flies on water and you put a fly in that looks same, why should it take it? The only reason normally is because your presentation's spot on. Your presentation's got a lot more to do with catching fish than the actual fly sometimes. The actual fly, if it thinks it's an edible item, most fish will come up to try it.
Right.
Your presentation's got to be spot on. That means no drag whatsoever.
Right.
And you can only do that through experience and we're outlining the fish and everything. So it's something you'll learn as you go along on the river.
Yeah.
But it's something we've learned over years. We've caught on flies with no right to catch on.
No,
but the presentation's been absolutely spot on.
We'll show them at a later date.
That's right. I mean, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add an underfur body. Now, if you look at this patch of rabbit fur, if I just fold that, you can see that dark grey underbody.
Yeah.
Now that's what I'm actually going to use as a dubbing material on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut a strip of this out and just get to that underfur. Alright, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut through that, just take any of those guard hairs off that I don't want. That's a nice fine dubbing. And again, all I'm going to do, a little bit of wax on that thread, and offer up that dubbing. Just tease that along. Just going to tease that a little bit.
And another thing, Tom, we found out that a winter rabbit skin
Yeah,
seems to stop up.
Because the oil's on skins, I think.
Yeah, seems to stop up better, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It dries.
Right, again now I'm going to form a nice, neat body. Try and keep it slim profile, because most of these flies are fairly slim profile. Now, I've got a little bit of excess on there, which I don't need. So I'm just going to strip that away. Just tidy that up a little bit. Now, I'm going to attle this one again with a grizzled attle. One of our favourite attles, because we're too tight to buy other ones. But that's me and Steve. And again, I'm going to offer that underneath of that. I've left that a little bit longer than normal, so you can actually see what's happening. So I'm going to tie that in underneath that shank and just trap that in. Make sure that's nice and secure. Now I can trim off that excess. Now I'm ready to actually put the turns on. And again, with these genetic attles, just makes it a lot easier to handle. I mean, that's nice and long. I don't need attle pliers for this one. So I'm just going to wind that through 3 or 4 turns and then tie off. Now I'm just going to trap that with that thread. Make sure that's nice and tight. And then just trim off that stalk.
It seems to be easier, Tommy, cutting that stalk off at top of eye.
You can
hold your scissors.
Yeah.
You can hold your scissors against eye, can't you?
That's right. And any stray fibres you can take out later on. So again, it's just a case now of whip finishing.
Can I just slow you down a little bit on that whip finishing tool, so I can just get you so they can see how you fasten it on, Tom?
Yeah. I've lengthened the bobbin off to give me enough to play with. And if you notice, there's 2 hooks on this one. There's one there and there's one there.
Right.
Now the first one I catch in, turn the tool a little bit and just drop that line into that other one.
Right.
Now once I've done that, take it to a point across from the fly and you're taking that line over the top, and now if you look, it creates like a number 4, and I've actually trapped that line, and all I'm going to do now is twist that around there about half a dozen times, take it out of that first hook, slide that up, and that's it. Just trim off that excess line. Any stray fibres that you don't want, again, just trim off. And there you have it. And that's a fly that will catch fish. It's like a little grey duster. It'll catch fish anywhere, anytime, different sizes. If you do have a few problems with these flies, sometimes what you can do is actually trim out the fibres underneath. And that makes it sit a little bit lower to the water. Now I'm just going to turn this vise round a little bit so you can actually see that. That's actually trimmed underneath, creates a little V shape, makes it sit a little bit lower in the water. We always find on the rivers that we fish, a lot of insects are trapped in the surface film, so we tend to tie a lot of flies that sit in the surface film. We don't tie some of these footprint type done things that sit on top of the water, and we don't normally use traditional full attle flies, because we found that trimming them always works a little bit better for us.
That's another fly foot box.
That's it. Right, so we're going to put these flies together just to show you what we've tied up today, and then probably next week sometime we'll go out and catch a few fish on these. We'll tie a few different variations up, maybe a few different sizes. We might even change body materials a little bit, but that's the basic fly setup. And all you need is a few in different sizes, maybe a few different colour variations, and you're ready to go. So what we've done is we've tied a few basic flies up. You've seen some techniques that are used. It'll just give you a start in tying a few flies. So we tied a couple of dries, which, I mean, they'll catch fish on our rivers. We've tied a couple of nymphs in different guises. I mean, they're chick nymphs with lead underbodies. That's gold lead. Again, gives it a little bit of weight. That one's got a little bit of copper wire underneath it. And it's just a case now of going out and catching a few fish. Right, we're going to show you a box of flies. These are all nymphs. Various weights, shades and colours. Which we do catch 1 or 2 fish on these. I mean, we'll catch more fish on heavy nymphs than we do on dry flies at times, because you don't always get fish topping. And what we'll do is we'll just show you a couple of basic setups with rod and reel, which we use, and show you how to attach leaders and tippets, and then we'll go out and catch a few fish.